In today's episode, we're going to make a merchant district for our medieval city, and we're going to start off with a pair of clipboards to be our foundation. And then I've got this piece of 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch thick foam that's going to be glued on top of it. And then we're going to lay out a few houses in a pretty simple pattern. I've got a bunch of these doll houses from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to use these as kind of our template for how we're going to set things up. And as you can see here, I'm just doing a very quick layout, just kind of thinking how I want things to go. I want there to be kind of a pretty defined setup to everything with a lot of playable space in between. So we've got a pretty nice main road here, and then a side alley that can be accessed. The point of this is to have some good playable area and have some reasonably detailed buildings. So that is what we're going to aim for today. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started making our city tile. So I've done a couple of these in the past, but this is going to be a larger one. So I'm just going to hot glue the two clipboards together, and then I want it to be a little bit more reinforced, so I'm using a little bit of hot glue to kind of help reinforce the edge and just kind of spread things out across the seam, just to make sure that it doesn't really have a chance to fall apart. Alright, so now that the seam is reinforced, we need to attach our piece of foam, and I'm just doing a quick, simple little couple of X's on the clipboards, and I'm going to press the foam down, and then lifting the edge, I'm going to go around the entirety of the board with some hot glue just to kind of seal the edges down. Then, using a bunch of these little tiles that I made with some thinner foam, this is like a 1/16 inch thick, I'm just going to glue it down. I made these using a Green Stuff World texture roller. It's the flagstone roller, and using that with a heat gun, I was able to press the pattern into these pieces of foam, and they hold pretty well. So once they're glued down, we're going to have a reasonably good 3 inch by 3 inch grid. And any gaps that there are can be filled in with some extra little bits and sand and tiles and things like that. Alright, so off camera, I completely forgot to hit record on my camera. I coated everything with some flat brown and then did a overbrushing of some Artist Loft gray. And here you can see I'm doing a dry brushing of some neutral gray, also from Artist Loft, just to give it a little bit of some color and catch the raised edges of the texture. Now, like I was saying before, any of these kind of gaps in the city tile here can be filled with stuff like painted sand to make it look like there's mud or dirt that's been trapped in the little crevices, or you can take some broken up bricks and things like that and just kind of tack them down and glue them into place just to kind of create an impression of some filled space. Now we're going to do a fairly light dry brush of some warm gray from Master's Touch. This is just going to help catch some of the edges and help kind of lighten and soften the colors. Now, once I was done with this, I realized I had gone a little bit heavy-handed with it, but it's not really going to be all that noticeable, so I'm not overly worried about that. Now, if you do this yourself and you don't like how bright it is, you can kind of tone it down with a little bit of wash. But I'm trying to avoid wash in this build. I might do it later on, but didn't want to do it right now. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start putting things together with the build. So I've got a pair of the doll houses here, and I want to raise one of them up on a piece of this 1-inch thick foam, and then once the buildings are done, I'm going to glue them together side by side so that it's one long building, but there's two defined little shops that are part of it. So using the grid on my mat here, I'm just going to pick a reasonable amount of space to go next to the building. I want this to kind of be like a little walkway or kind of porch or patio that's out in front of the building. As you can see here, we've got a little bit of space. It's not a lot, but it's definitely enough to put a model or two, so that's kind of what I want to go with. And since I don't want it to be perfectly square, I'm going to mark out a little notch here and just cut a section off on an angle, and this is just going to give it a little bit of extra character. Alright, so now that I've got this cut, we'll come back and revisit this section a little bit later in the build, but I want to work on a couple of other things first. So we're going to set this off to the side. So we're going to add a bunch of wood trim to all of the buildings. This is going to help a lot in kind of giving a lot of good decoration and just some extra definition to the buildings. So I'm using a whole bunch of some coffee stirrer sticks. The nicest thing about these is that they're made out of pretty cheap wood. They can bend, they can be cut pretty easy. I'm using some old wire cutters that I have, but you can also just as easily cut these with a pair of scissors. And here you can see I'm just kind of marking out and then bending them into place to kind of wrap around this bay window. I wanted it to look like it's a continuous piece of wood instead of a whole bunch of different pieces that are cut and then glued down. Now, it's a pretty easy process, but it's not one that I can just, make ahead of time and then just have to put in place. So this is one of those unfortunate things where it's cut and apply as needed. And then it's just kind of going around the rest of the building and adding trim where I think it's going to be needed or where I want some extra detail. Now, for areas like this with the bay window, I'm taking a piece of wood and kind of breaking it down the center so that it kind of wraps around the edge of the bay window. And once that's glued down, I'm going to just take a little bit of hot glue and just kind of go over the broken section, the seam, just to kind of fill it in, make it look like it's a continuous piece of wood and that it's not broken. Now, you can see that this is a door frame, but I'm not going to be using it as one, so I'm just going to put a couple of pieces of trim over it to kind of help mask everything off. And a little bit later in the build, I'm going to be covering this whole section anyway, so it's going to help to add a little bit of reinforcement and also be a little bit of an area that can kind of grab onto the filler that I'm going to put into place. And here I'm just kind of adding a piece at an angle just to kind of give a little bit of extra character to the piece. Alright, so here I've got one that I made into a 2-story building, but it's got these kind of rough, harsh edges, and I want to cover that up. So using a piece of chipboard, I cut it to kind of fit into place, and then I'm going to, as you can see here, tack down one side of it, and then using a little bit of hot glue, fully hide the seam. This will also help kind of reinforce everything. And then apply some more hot glue to the other side, bend it into place, and then I'm just going to hold it until everything kind of solidifies, and then cover the seam with some more hot glue to disguise all the edges. Now, if you do this, it is not a quick process. It does take a little bit of time, so just kind of be forewarned about that. but the end result looks really nice, and I think it's worth the wait and worth the extra effort. Alright, so once all that's set, we can start adding a little bit more trim to help define all of our edges. So anywhere where there's a harsh corner like this, I'm going to frame it on both sides, and that's going to just kind of add a little bit of extra character and make it look like there's support beams going up the full length of the building. Now, I hope this doesn't seem too repetitive, but this point of the process is really just a whole lot of measure, cut, glue, measure, cut, glue. Now, the bright side of that is every building does at that point become a unique piece of art, and is very difficult to recreate exactly the same every time. And you can have a whole lot of fun just kind of improvising what decorations you want attached to the building and things like that. So you can really kind of go a little bit crazy with some of the designs and patterns of the trim just to kind of add whatever extra dimension or character you'd like. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So once all the main trim is done, I'm going to attach a couple of extra pieces to the large arched gable at the center of the roof. This is just going to add a little bit of... It's not really going to add anything extra to the build other than it's going to help kind of frame the roof shingles that I'm going to be attaching on in a later step. This will give it the impression that these pieces of wood are kind of framing the roof instead of just kind of letting the shingles hang off the side. And then one more piece across the bottom, and the framing of the gable is complete. Alright, so now that that's done, let's start working on the roof. So most of the roofs are pretty straightforward. It's just a simple repeating pattern, just kind of alternating back and forth with the shingles to kind of create that characteristic, iconic look of simple roof shingles. Now, some of the roofs I left the small little arched gables on. For those, it's a whole lot of custom cutting and fitting, and for whatever reason, I did not get the recording of that I thought I did. It was blurry the whole time, and rather than try and fight with it and try and get some of the footage on here, I wasn't able to really get that to work. So I'm just gonna kind of let you know, if you're going to do something like that, it's a whole lot of custom trimming and custom fitting of the roof shingles. Now, I wanted each roof to be a little bit unique, so not all of them are built the exact same. On a couple of them, I do the shingles with a full wraparound. Essentially, all four sides of the roof have the shingles on them. On one of them, I did some wooden slats down two of the sides instead of the shingles, and some of them have shingles covering all of the corners, and a couple of the others don't. They have some wooden sticks down the sides, just to kind of create some variation, make it appear as though not everything is the exact same. Alright, so once the roof is glued into the place, I'm just going to use some cutters or some scissors and clip all of the overhang off just to kind of line everything up. Now, each roof is going to get some form of a ridge beam. In this case, I'm going to take a barbecue skewer and glue that standing upright down the center, and then using a couple of coffee sticks, I'm going to just kind of create a little bit of a angled section on both sides to kind of give a little bit of extra definition. And this is also going to hide part of the seam for the roof shingles. Alright, so I'll do the same on the other side, but first I'm going to take a couple more sticks and hide the seams on the roof section for this one. Now, I should have made the top coffee stick a little bit longer. It would have made it easier to disguise everything, but I can fill that in with some hot glue or some extra pieces of wood later on. As you can see, it's once again a whole lot of measure, trim, and then glue everything into place once you're happy with the result. Now this is going to disguise the edge of the roof pretty nicely, and just to kind of make it look like a solid piece of wood, I'm going to fill the seam with a little bit of hot glue and just kind of rub that flat with the tip of the hot glue gun, just to kind of make it look like it's a seamless piece of wood. Alright, so now let's go ahead and revisit that little foam platform. So I trimmed off a section that's going to be where the stairs are going to go, and now we need to kind of very quickly put in a rough little grid. Now I'm marking out some 1-inch sections here, but the section for the stair cutout was 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to add in some extra little lines and then carve in some kind of like flagstone pieces with a pencil. Now, if pieces tear out, that's fine. It's just going to add a little bit of extra definition and make it look like these are, rough stones that have been kind of set into place. And I want this whole thing to have the kind of rough appearance that a series of foundation blocks were set into place, and then the rest of the area was kind of filled in with some smaller stones and just kind of nested into place. So I'm hoping that's what I'm conveying here, and I really like the look of it once it's all finished. Alright, so now that we've got our flagstone done, we need to start making our foundation blocks. And that's just a simple little pass with a hobby knife around the edges to kind of create a defined pair of lines. And I'm just kind of exaggerating them with a pencil here so you can kind of see them a little bit easier. And then I'm just going to go around and carve some notches in to make everything look like large stone bricks. And then once everything's carved, I go back and exaggerate everything again with a pencil, just to kind of give it a little bit of clear definition. And then using my texture plate, I'm going to kind of give some quick texture all around the piece. Now to create the stairs, I'm going to take a few pieces of some thin craft foam. I got this from the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to quickly trim the edges and make a simple set of stairs. Now, the way I'm designing this is each step in the stair is roughly 1/2 inch, It's not perfectly shaped, but that's fine, because it'll add a little bit of extra character. And then create a simple little brick pattern to line everything up. Then using a tinfoil ball, I texture all of the steps. Alright, so now, using a hot glue gun, I'm going to glue all of the steps together. And this is a very quick process, and I really like how it turned out. I'm pretty sure a model could stand on top of these without falling off, but even if it's a little top heavy, getting it angled right, you could put a little something underneath one side of the model to kind of help it balance, but you can still have something standing on the stairs. Now I trim away any of the little extra pieces that might kind of impede its attachment to the rest of the platform, and then stick it in place with a little bit more hot glue. Remove a little bit of the blobbed out excess, and then on the bottom I'm going to, off camera, reinforce everything with a little bit more hot glue. But you can see here how everything's going to attach together. Now to seal everything down, I coat the entire piece with a mix of Mod Podge and black paint. This will help solidify everything and disguise all of the foam color. Now once this is completely coated, I'm going to set it off to the side to dry. And once it's dry, I do a overbrushing with some Artist Loft Gray, just to kind of give a base stone color. Now the nicest part about doing the black underlayer is you get these really nice deep grout lines in all of the stones, which I really like because it just adds extra definition and color to the model and just really isn't that hard to put together. Alright, so once that's been dried, I go over it with a dry brushing of some neutral gray, and that's just going to pick out all of the raised edges and highlight some of the texture. And now to finish it off, I use some warm gray just to add a little bit of softness and just kind of give it that warm, hewn stone, earthy appearance. Alright, so now it's time to paint the buildings. So starting off, I'm going to use some raw sienna to go over all of the trim sections. And I'm doing just kind of a medium level dry brush, just kind of getting some paint on them, and I'm not overly choosy about being light-handed with any of this, because it's going to get another dry brush, and these always dry a little bit more faded than they appear when it goes on wet. So I'm not worried about it being over the top. And now to add a weathering effect, I go over everything with a dry brushing of some warm gray. Now, I do think I went a little too heavy with it in some places, so you might see me here and there just kind of rubbing it off with my fingers. Alright, so now for the roof, we're going to grab some ultramarine blue, and this is going to go over all of the tiles. Now, I wanted a nice deep blue coloration for the roofs, just to kind of add some variation to the rest of the city. So once this dries, I apply a second coating, and it was still pretty dark, but it was definitely more blue than it was anything else, so I really liked how it came out. Alright, so it's still pretty dark, so we're going to do a reverse dry brush with some paint that I mixed up. I used some titanium white and some ultramarine blue just to kind of make a light blue that will help to accent everything and pick out the edges of the shingles, but still give that nice blue color. Alright, so now let's go ahead and work on the windows and the walls. So I attached the doors before I painted everything, and we're going to attach a few little strips of some metal tape to kind of look like reinforced strapping or hinges. And then using a toothpick, I add some little studs for rivets. Now for the windows, I'm going to, in a couple of the places where I've got these little bay windows, I'm going to use some tacky glue and set down the two windows on the side. Now for the center window, I apply a little bit of glue at the top where it's going to connect to the building, and then some glue on the sides, and then just press all three windows together, and once this dries, it'll be pretty solidly in place. Now for any of these little gables that are still attached, I'm going to put a piece of metal tape into the framing and just kind of smooth it down with a stick, before applying a piece of mesh that I painted black over the tape to kind of create the impression of some leaded windows. And if they don't stay in on their own, I'm just going to kind of tack them in place with a little bit of tacky glue. And this will dry clear, so I'm not worried about it being visible. And now to fill in the walls. I took a small little sandwich bag and put inside of it a little bit of some lightweight wall filler, some spackle essentially, a little bit of some Mod Podge just to kind of help it flow a little bit easier, and then some unbleached titanium paint. Then I squished the bag around until it was thoroughly mixed, and then nipped a small little piece off of one of the corners. That allowed me to use the bag kind of as almost a piping bag. And here you can see how it can be used to quickly fill in all of the gaps in the walls. Now, it does kind of come out in lines, so occasionally I stop and then go over everything with a toothpick to just kind of swirl things around and break up that little rigid texture. Now, I forgot to do this on this side, but in these sections where I've got an old window that needs to be covered up, here I forgot to do it, but in the other areas I will add some filler underneath, take like a craft stick and then glue that into place underneath everything so that I have a little bit less filler that I have to use. Now, the huge benefit of doing this is that if the wall filler chips during gameplay or something like that, it's not going to be something that you need to paint over because the paint was already mixed with it. It's always going to be this color. So saves a bunch of time doing repair work later on. Alright, so here we've got our building that's going to be on a raised platform. I'm just going to show you how I did this one. The others are, pretty simple. Just kind of glue them together with some hot glue and some tacky glue. But this one I'm going to lay out some tacky glue across the center and then some hot glue to kind of hold everything down while the tacky glue dries. And then I rigged up a little kind of shop sign in the same kind of hanging fashion that I did for the street signs, and I'm just going to hot glue this in place next to the door. Now, on this end you can see that it's kind of a blank wall, and that's because we're going to be gluing this building next to it. Now, I did make a couple of different variations of signs just to kind of keep everything a little bit unique, so I'm going to quickly tack that one into place, and then using some hot glue, I'm going to fix this building into place against the other building, and then on the bottom I'll reinforce it with some hot glue and add some tacky glue in a couple of small places. Alright, and just like that, episode 13 is finished. Holy cow, this was a long one to put together. This took me a solid 2 weeks to get everything done. All 5 buildings, which turned into 3 buildings once everything was glued together, the city tile, and all the signs. This was quite a bit of stuff to put together. Sorry for the lack of updates on that. I'll be sure and be a little bit more prompt with those in the future. Alright, 13 down, 1 more to go. The series is almost finished. So, thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment in the comments section, let me know how I'm doing, how you like the series, and we will see everyone next episode.